All right. Hello, students and alumni. Welcome to our IGP Alumni panel. We're so excited to have all of our alumni here to share their knowledge and experience with all of you. And we're going to start with a moderated portion to this panel, and then we'll switch over to student asked questions in about 30 to 40 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. We have 4 alumni panelists here from different cohorts of IGP, ranging from the first cohort to more recent ones. We have Anastasia Olienkova, we have Amanda Robinson, and we have Ricardo Peterson and Bradley Wahid Cotton here to talk to you today. And I'm going to let them go ahead and each introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Amanda.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Amanda. I was in IGP back when it was called GCEP. I was in the second cohort, so I went abroad in 2014, 2015, and 2014, 2015, and I graduated in December 2015. And now I'm back in France. I did my PhD, and now I'm here again.
Great, thank you, Amanda. I'll have Bradley go next.
Hi everyone, I'm Bradley Wahid Cotton. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated from NAU in 2018. I studied environmental science with an emphasis in applied geology and Spanish, and I studied abroad in Argentina.
Thank you, Bradley. I'll have Ricardo go next.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I'm Ricardo Peterson, and I had my study abroad. Again, it was also called GCEP at the time. I was the first cohort. I think there's like 4 of us at that time, and it's amazing to see how much it's grown since. It's 2013, 2014, I believe. Yeah, that was the year. I graduated in electrical engineering, and my modern languages degree in 2015. And yeah, I studied abroad in Paris, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you, Ricardo. And last but certainly not least, we'll have Anastasia go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anastasia Olienkova. I went to NAU and I graduated in 2020. I was a COVID grad. I went abroad in 2018 and 2019. I studied in marketing and German, and now I'm in California.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we'll start with our first question. Can you tell us about your current career? I know you all briefly introduced it, but tell us a little bit more about that career and a little bit about the path you took to get there after graduating from NAU and with IGP. Anyone can volunteer to go first if they want to.
I'll go first. I'll go first. Because it was COVID times, it was kind of a first come, first served career kind of situation. But currently, I am a marketing and business development manager for a structural engineering company here in the Bay Area. We are owned by one of the biggest construction contractors in the country. We actually do have a European office in Amsterdam, so expansion, woo. But when COVID kind of hit, the only essential workers that was around was construction, and they were really the only ones hiring. So I was hired by a mechanical contractor as a marketing coordinator, and that's how my career kind of started in big construction.
Thank you. Amanda, we want to go next? Or
yeah,
let's do
sure,
Amanda,
I can go.
And then we'll do Ricardo after that.
Perfect. So like I said, I'm in France. I'm a postdoctoral researcher. I'm a chemist. And to get here, I followed a very, very traditional path. So I finished my bachelor's at NAU in 2015. I came to France in 2016 to do a master's in chemistry. And then after that, I did what's called a concours, which is a very typical French kind of system. And basically, what it involves is about this time of year, the professors put out offers for projects for PhD students where they're looking to attract different master's students. And you meet with a PhD advisor, discuss or potential, we'll say at this point, PhD advisor, discuss the project. If they approve of you as the candidate, will say, then they'll present you in this kind of very formal presentation, which is the concours, the competition. And so you have to present your background and what you are capable of doing and why you're a good fit for the project. And you have to convince the jury. And if you convince the jury, they give you the funding. So I managed to convince them. I got the funding to do my project. And then after that, I just was applying to do specifically in academia research. And I got the job working at Collège de France, where I am now. And so, yeah, very typical for what to expect in research.
Thank you, Amanda. Ricardo, you want to go next?
Certainly. So I am a hardware engineer. I'm also in the Bay Area. I work at Apple, and my path was also rather traditional after undergraduates during my time at NAU. I was fortunate enough to pursue several internships and research positions. Being at NAU for a fifth year with this opportunity also opened up another year to get experience. And so with all of the acquisition of all that experience in France, in the United States, I used all of that to, do my best to get into good graduate schools. I was fortunate enough to get into Stanford, where I completed my PhD. That took me about 5 years, and at Stanford, of course, I acquired a lot more research experience, industry experience. I grew my network, worked with people from all around the world, and that was a great fortune of mine to have done that. And yeah, after graduating, I graduated in 2020. So I was a COVID grad for graduate school, I guess, and that led me to where I am now, a full-time position working on iPhones. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Thanks, Ricardo. And Bradley?
So I am a PhD student. I just started, and literally this morning I turned in my final assignment for the semester. So I'm very excited. I am at Auburn University in Earth Systems Science. After graduating, I went straight into my master's degree. I got a master's degree at the University of Wyoming in geology, and I was really set on the path of going straight into academia. I've always wanted to be a college professor. So I went and I was convinced that I was going to go master's to PhD to working. And I hated my master's experience. I had really, really terrible time. I was really downbeaten, really tired, really exhausted. And I was really torn off of academia. I thought it was a really terrible place. So I left and I got a job at the Science Education Resource Center, where I did education resource development and professional development for educators and scientists across the country. And that time was amazing for me. I got to get some experience and develop some relationships with people, and also figure out I really actually do love this stuff and I really wanted to come back. So here I am.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for sharing your paths. I think it's really interesting to hear some more traditional and maybe some that follow a less linear path. All right, so next question is about skills and knowledge. What are skills or knowledge that you learned throughout IGP or GCEP at the time and your year abroad that have helped you find your first position after graduation or you find most useful in your current career? Would anyone like to volunteer to go first, or would you like me to pick one of you? I can start with, how about Amanda this time?
So I mean, I guess I'm cheating a little bit because I still live in France, or I moved back to France, we'll say. So I kind of live IGP continuously. But to make it more general, we'll say that the most important thing for me during IGP was learning how to network, which is something that, I mean, at NAU, I had to learn basically, but the most important thing, like, to survive my IGP year was knowing who I could talk to help me with basic things like setting up my schedule, making my internship contracts, getting my badge to go to the cafeteria, all these kinds of things. And so because science is such a collaborative field, like learning how to network when I was in IGP, I still use these skills all the time as a scientist. So.
Great, thank you. How about Anastasia? Would you be willing to go next?
Yeah, I think for me, the top skill that I had to use was adaptability, because you come into a new country, right? You're like, oh gosh, everything is new. I mean, in my case, I had never been to Germany before, and I had studied German, but you're there and you're like, oh my God, I feel like I've never spoke this language before. I've never seen it. Oh my God. And you're adapting to it. And as in marketing, things are constantly changing, and in construction, everything's constantly changing. So I have to constantly adapt. And I second Amanda, like networking. I have to network every single day and step out of my comfort zone every single day. So that was one of the biggest skills I definitely took away.
Great, thank you. Bradley, would you be willing to go next?
Yeah, I think so. I went in learning or expecting to take away language and science, and I did. But today I live in Auburn, Alabama. There's not a lot of Spanish being spoken here, and I don't necessarily do the same science that I did before. So the things that I took away primarily was learning culture. So learning language, you're not just learning words, you're learning culture and being able to use that every single day. Like I moved to Wyoming, then to Minnesota, then to Alabama. Every single day I was adapting to culture and being able to use those skills to be successful. But even beyond like moving geographically, like moving into the workplace is learning a new culture. Moving to a different university is learning a new culture. So being able to use that everywhere I go is a huge one. And the other thing I learned from my advisor where I was at was the importance of people and caring for people and being able to recognize that the most important resource we have are the people with us. So really just being able to make sure that like I care for everyone around me is something I do every single day. And it's some of the research I do too.
Great, thank you so much, Bradley. Ricardo, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, sure. A lot of great things said here. I mean, I would just say when I was in France, I guess it was the very first time I started working with foreigners. I was in a lab that, well, I mean, I had a lot of foreigners. There were French, there were other Europeans, Indians, Chinese. I haven't really been exposed to that at the time. And since then, I've been working mostly with foreigners, and that includes graduate school and where I'm at now. And so there's a lot of things to consider, right? You have communication, the ways we all communicate. We have feedback, the way we provide feedback, persuasive skills, leadership, the way we schedule, the way we make decisions. There's a lot of things that vary tremendously from one culture to the next. And so I got a flavor of that when I was in France, of course. Right? I didn't get the whole gamut of cultures being in France. I just had one narrow flavor of it. But the big thing that I learned is that, or rather, I appreciated, was that we all vary significantly from culture to culture. And so, as an example, like leadership style, for instance, I have a very egalitarian viewpoint on leadership. Maybe if I am a manager, I totally have within my expectation to have all of my colleagues speak to me as if I'm in their level. That's just one example, but there are other cultures that are far more hierarchical in terms of leadership, and so you have to kind of learn how to navigate through those different cultural nuances. And France wasn't that much different from the way I liked it, but like the point is that you get to learn from many different backgrounds and appreciate that those styles are there. And so I guess I just want to say, yeah, in a professional setting, you have to look out for all of the qualities that that kind of manifest. I just named a few. I think the other big one is, I think adaptation was also said. Adaptation and composure, I would kind of group those together. So yeah, moving to a different city, different country, kind of had to learn how to keep your cool and learn how to control your surrounding situation, especially if you're alone. So I've had to do that several times, multiple times since France, yeah, even including where I'm at now. I was sent to Asia. I've never been there before and had to kind of learn how to navigate that city all on my own. And so, yeah, there's a lot to learn. I think just be open-minded and reflect on what you're learning and try to keep note of all of those lessons, and that'll serve you in your professional career, no doubt.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. Those are really good skills that you all have developed, and I certainly think those are ones we're hoping our current students will, develop while they're in IGP and especially in their year abroad. I think like the concept of adaptability is certainly a big one as our world continues to change and the world gets smaller and smaller. Like you said, Ricardo, you didn't know you were going to go to Asia and then you did. So you never know. All right. Next question. If you had the opportunity to redo your career path, what would you do differently? Wow. Would anyone like to volunteer to go first? Or should I pick someone again? I could pick someone again. I'll start with Brad.
I can
Oh,
go.
okay. Amanda's going
No worries,
first.
I can go. So personally, I am quite pleased with where my career is and where it's headed. So I don't think that I would change anything specifically, but I think that I would have liked to get involved with the French Chemical Society much earlier than what I did. I only joined it in 2020 because this kind of goes with my whole networking thing. I only joined it in 2020, and like since then, I've seen how useful it is to be able to have a group of professionals that I'm able to go and see on semi-regular basis and to be able to expand my network through this kind of we'll say society or guild. I'm sure most careers have these. So I really honestly think that networking is one of the most important skills that we can have to be able to develop ourselves and our careers. So that's what I would have done, I think.
Thank you. Would anyone like to go next? Maybe, okay,
I can follow
Anastasia.
up with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll preface this by saying I'm very happy with where my career is right now, but I never imagined it to be in the field that it is. When I was graduating, I had two career paths, one of them being fashion and the other being the automotive industry. And the automotive industry being like Mercedes in Germany and fashion being Jimmy Choo in England. Never did construction come up. So I would have liked to be able to use German in my everyday life. But it just so happens that that didn't work out. So if I could redo my life a little bit, I would have wished for COVID to not have happened so that one of those career paths would have worked out. But I am very happy with where I am now. And my career has been taking me to places I have never been before. And maybe I will still get a chance to use my German. We'll see.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you got plenty of time ahead of you, Anastasia. You never know where life will take you next. So, but I'm glad you were able to, find a career that was unexpected, but good for you. That's great. And then last, but oh no, I think Ricardo and Bradley both haven't responded yet.
Yeah.
Okay, Ricardo next.
Sure. I guess one thing I would redo, well, I guess I would do it differently. I mean, I don't want to say I neglected this, but keeping your network is a really big one. You're going to meet a lot of people throughout your life, and you'll develop relationships with people, friendly relationship, professional relationships. And I think it's really important. It takes work to maintain them. It's not something that will be maintained passively. So what I mean by that is, if years go by and you haven't spoken with someone you've had a positive experience with professionally, then it's almost like you're going to lose that piece of your network. And so I would really encourage everybody to follow up with others and ask how they're doing. Have a coffee with them. No problem, no, without having to ask for anything, right? Like you just follow up, have a conversation, see what's new. Keep up with all of that network. It's going to serve you very well moving forward in the future. If there comes a day where you need an opportunity, you're going to have a much more support around you if you maintain your network in that sense. The other piece of advice is not being afraid to pivot. So I think we're all susceptible to sunk cost fallacies where, we spend 5 years doing one thing and then we think that that's what we have to do for the rest of our lives, in order to not, uh, in order to, like, we think everything we did will be in vain if we pivot now. But you have to understand that you're very young. And everything you've learned along the way, regardless of what you've done, I promise you there'll be some skill sets that will carry you forward, regardless of what you do. So you're not wasting time, right? If you need to pivot, if there's something else that fascinates you, if there's something else that's captivating, and you have this gut feeling that you'll be much happier doing it. I would say, especially if you're in your 20s, it'd be silly not to do it. So that's one piece of advice that I would give. And I think I would have pivoted earlier for a few things that took me a while to kind of get to this realization. And so kind of back to the question, that's what I would that's what I would have redone if I had the opportunity.
Nice. Thank you, Ricardo. Super interesting. And finally, Bradley.
Yeah, I think interesting to carry on with like Ricardo said. My pivot is kind of scary to think about, but I absolutely would have dropped out of my master's. And that is super scary to me because I am definitely a perfectionist. I am definitely someone who wants to be perfect, who wants to have great grades, who wants to do all these things. And I knew my first semester that it was not serving me and it was not good, and I had no backup plan. And that to me means I finished, and I did. And I am still to this day struggling with some of the things that I carried from that experience. So I would absolutely say follow your gut, do what you want to do. If you know it's not serving you, be courageous. And I wish that I would have. I don't know where I would be today, but that's one thing that I would change.
Thank you, Bradley. I'm sure you would still be in a successful role and maybe you'd still be where you are now. Who knows? Okay, so we have one final question in our moderated session, but before we move on to that, I just want to let students know we do have a Q&A. There should be a button down in like the menu on the bottom where you can ask questions, both with your name or anonymously. Preferably, we'd like if you included your name, and if you're willing to during the Q&A portion, to ask them yourself, we'd love for you to do that as well. But we'll get to that once we finish up this final question, but feel free to start putting your questions in so we have them start or for when we start after this question. All right, so final question. What advice do you have for our IGP students as they look for future careers or future programs or schools to apply to?
I think I can volunteer for that one. I don't think I
Thanks,
volunteered to
Ricardo.
go first for any of these questions. So I'll do this one. So I guess I can just try to give you some pieces of advice that worked for me. One piece of advice is to communicate, and by that I mean you really have to learn how to reach out to other people, professors, people in industry, anyone who can give you a leg up and a hand to um, uh, get some opportunity, some professional experience, I should say. At undergrad, I remember I had no internships. I had some research experience, but I had no internships, and I really wanted an internship. At the time was at Intel, and I remember I reached out to, and I was in Paris at the time, so I was studying abroad. I reached out to over 100 different engineers, through phone calls and emails. And the only thing that I wanted was an interview. I managed to get 2 interviews out of all of those phone calls, and one of them landed me an opportunity. So looking back on that, I don't know if I would have gone there if I didn't. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have gone there if I was too afraid to make a phone call or to send an email. And I kind of wish I would have done more of that earlier on. So it was a bit of a revelation to me to know that, yeah, I mean, it took a lot of work, but you only really need one opportunity. And then once you get it, the follow-on opportunities kind of fall. Like you start to get more opportunities because you have the background. You know how it works, right? So it's kind of that cycle of like of opportunities that many undergrads feel is really difficult to land that first, get that first foot in the door. It's just like, how do you even do it if I don't have any experience? And it's hard work, but if you work hard on it, I think you'll find some success. And so I would just say, yeah, just do everything you can to speak to professionals, and that will serve you well. I hope that makes sense as a piece of advice.
I think it's great. And that's certainly something we tell students as well. So, all right, who would like to?
Yeah,
Amanda?
I'd like to go because I want to piggyback a little bit off of what Ricardo was saying. Because for me, the advice that I would give to people is to always try and contact people who used to work in, the field, or who are current, or who used to be at the school or the program that you are interested in applying to. Because I mean, at least this is my experience, is that usually when we can contact alumni, people who've been there before, they're very willing to give you their opinion about what they did and what helped them to get into a program, or what they liked about the program, or if they would recommend it. And so or what they like about a company, or these kinds of things. And so I think it's really important to not be afraid to reach out to alumni. And I also think that it's really important to try things for yourself, because when I was in my undergrad, I had done 2 internships while I was at NAU, leaning more into, we'll say, my biology background. But it wasn't until I tried an internship in chemistry that I really found what sparked for me, and that's what's led me for the rest of my career. So I think that it's really important also to not be afraid to try something new, because you can always pivot, as we said earlier.
That's also great advice. Thank you, Amanda.
I'll go
And-
next because
okay,
I'll
thanks,
piggyback
Anastasia.
off of that.
Nice.
I'm gonna say, yeah, step out of your comfort zone is my first one. Don't be afraid. It might be scary, but if you guys are in this program, you're moving to a different country for a year. You're already stepping out of your comfort zone. My second piece of advice is don't be afraid to say yes. It's important. Sometimes you're gonna say yes. And my last piece of advice is don't be afraid to say no, because sometimes it's just not for you. And that's okay. It's okay to say no. And that's it.
Thanks, Anastasia. I agree. Good advice as well. Thank you. Bradley?
My advice definitely would be to take some time to get to know yourself and figure out what it is that you actually want and where it is that you want to go. And not be afraid if that doesn't fit within some boxes. And if don't be limited by what exists, and also don't settle. Especially if you're looking into programs or schools. There's someone for you, there's some place for you, there's some research for you that is exactly what you want. Don't try and make something else fit because it's convenient for whatever reason. If you have to convince yourself, it's not right and you shouldn't do it.
Great. Thank you so much. You all have wonderful wisdom to share, and certainly things that I think are really good to impart on our current students. I hope all of our current students listening are, taking down some notes here from their wise alumni. So we're going to move into student questions. I think how we're going to do this is, well, I see some questions from Janelle Pena. Janelle, I'm gonna would you like to ask your questions to them yourself? Or would you like me to ask them for them? Okay, cool. I'll ask for her. She's in a noisy area. Okay, so we'll start with let's see. Let's start with this one. Has being bilingual been beneficial to you all? Would any of you like to answer that one?
Yes, it's definitely beneficial. Actually, any interview that I've ever had in my life, it always starts out. I'm actually trilingual. German was my third language. So it's always the first thing people ask me, be like, oh, do you really speak all these languages? Tell us about it. And it's an easy conversation starter. So it's definitely helped in that aspect.
So a funny anecdote is I don't know this for a fact, but I have a feeling that part of the reason why I got my job is because of the language background. So my manager who hired me is French, and the first question he asked me in our little phone call interview was, "Tell me more about this language degree that you have." And so we kind of kicked off our very first discussion speaking about France. Of course, after that, there's like a slew of technical interviews that you have to go through, of course. So it's not like it was the only thing. But what got it kicked off, I don't know. I can't tell you for sure, but I have a feeling that that really helped me. But in any case, yes, to be a bit more precise, learning or knowing a second language, yeah, it's obviously, of course, I think it's very beneficial, yeah, in many ways. It helps you also empathize with everyone else who is speaking English. I mean, English is the international language, right? And you're going to meet with many other foreigners, especially if you work in the States, but even if you work in other lab settings abroad who speak English, and just having that empathy to know, like, wow, like you actually had to learn this second language. I mean, you have your native tongue, but here we are speaking English. The fact that so many of these foreigners are so good at it, at first I just didn't appreciate it, but now I do. And of course, it also just expands your vocabulary significantly, even in your native tongue. There are a lot of roots that these other languages, whether it's a Germanic root or it's a Latin root, I felt like my vocabulary in my native tongue has also expanded. So I mean, I can keep going on. I think there's a lot of benefits of learning a second language.
Thank you. Anyone else want to take a stab at it, or shall we move on to the next question? All right. Okay, on the note of language still, I'll answer one more from Janelle and then we'll move on to ask some other students questions as well. What do you do currently to continue and keep up with your language skills, if you do so?
Well, for me, I'm married to a linguist fanatic. She's an interpreter and a translator, and she takes her language very, very seriously. She's from Argentina, and so we always have discussions on over language. So I guess in terms of the linguistics as a subject, we talk about that a lot at home, but at work, yeah, French is not the predominant language, so unfortunately I don't have the opportunity to speak it much.
Thank you. Any other alumni have any advice for how you potentially connect with your language you learned, or the languages you know, since some of us are trilingual?
So if Bradley and Anastasia don't want to say anything, I can talk maybe a little bit about what I did during my IGP year and when I moved back to France. I was basically trying to watch movies and everything in French. I kept in touch with my French friends, and yeah, I think that you just have to practice, and it's a nice way to be able to connect with people and to build relationships even after living abroad. It doesn't have to be in a or like in the country where the language is spoken to be able to find people that can speak it.
Thank you.
I'll very briefly say the German that I do upkeep, Duolingo. Love my Duolingo.
Duolingo is helpful. Thanks.
I would say though that this is the hardest thing for me since graduating and since leaving. Like honest, don't practice at all. I don't remember the last time I spoke Spanish. I've also had a bit of like a revelation with it. Like I really like dove into the cultural side of it. So now I have all these questions of like, oh, if I speak Spanish, am I culturally appropriating someone? I don't want to make assumptions that they can't speak English. So I really struggle internally with like when it is appropriate to use it, especially because I am not Latina. I don't want to pretend to be anything that I'm not. So if anyone has advice, I also would love it because this is super hard for me.
Yeah, I totally understand that as a learner of Japanese. There's not a lot of opportunities up here in Northern Arizona, but I do agree, you know, like consuming media is always a good idea. But that's a really good point you bring up, Bradley, of, you know, knowing how to or when to use it, especially in the United States with a language like Spanish. So students, if you have anything for them when we exchange contact information in the end, please. On that note, I see a question from Nathalia. Nathalia, do you want to ask it yourself or would you prefer I ask it for you?
I'm sorry, I'm in a really noisy place. So
That's okay.
I'm
All right,
sorry.
I'll ask it for you. No worries. All right. So Nathalia says, I'm bilingual in Spanish and English, currently learning Japanese through IGP. Are there any tips to overcome the difficulties in learning another language? Has there been times where you're afraid to speak it? So I guess it's kind of sounding like it's similar to what Bradley was saying. Has there been times where you were afraid to speak the language that you were learning, and how did you overcome it? I think especially like considering your year abroad, I think that would be something to talk to our students about, because a lot of these students are going to go abroad soon.
I can touch on that. Or Bradley, do you want to touch on it?
I mean, we could both touch on it. My big thing, I was just gonna say speak. Like you gotta speak, you gotta do it. Especially at the university setting with like there's so many opportunities at NAU to go and practice. And you just have to do it. And I had the pleasure of going to a place where there was absolutely no English anywhere, like no signs, no language, like no one spoke English. So yeah, the more you speak it before you go abroad is going to be better, because overcoming the fear of it is you just have to do it and you'll be better off for it. But yeah.
I was terrified of speaking German. I was so scared, and my professor kind of forced me to go to German night at New Marco's pizza night. She would just be like, let's just go, it's fine. And she would just ask us questions, and I think it was my sophomore year before I actually decided to go and like practice speaking German. And I think I only did it once until I actually moved to Germany. And even then, like I was so scared the first week. I'm like, I'm gonna screw this up. I'm gonna have an accent. Like people are gonna know I like can't do this. You just get over it, honestly. Like once you're there. I also did the immersion class in Germany, and after that, you really get over your fear. You meet the people, and everyone, and like you realize that everyone's just there to learn, and like everyone's kind of like they're all like normal people, and so you just talk to them and everyone gets it and you get over your fear.
Yeah, one other point too, she says, oh, she was scared to have an accent, she was scared to look dumb. You do have an accent and you will look dumb. So
yeah, to this day when I speak German, I have a very thick Russian accent when I speak German.
Oh,
they all know I'm not.
I'm
Russian. My other language is Russian, so I like very they point me out in a crowd.
Yeah, I mean, you'll look dumb, but I think people are going to be tolerant. I mean, it won't be that much different from how you feel with others who are struggling to speak English. Think about it. Someone's struggling to speak English with you. Are you thinking that they're stupid? No,
Yeah.
that's not what you're thinking. I mean,
Right.
so extend that same logic the other way around. Okay, so and I think that that'll boost your confidence and kind of make you forget about how you're sounding because people are going to be patient and are going to want to help you, generally speaking. I also just wanted to touch on one more thing, and that when you are okay, so the goal is immersion. Everyone will tell you that, right? You have to immerse yourself. You have to immerse yourself when you're in that other, I guess in this case, Japan. Um, you also have to understand, be prepared to also immerse yourself culturally. You can't separate the immersion in a language with the immersion
Yeah.
of a culture. They're going to be intertwined. So your way of life is not going to be the same as wherever you're immersing yourself in. And so be prepared to learn how to immerse yourself culturally because I think, yeah, you're going to need to learn to do that as a prerequisite if your goal is to constantly immerse yourself in a language. And so it's hard to explain exactly how that's like, but once you go through it, you'll understand and you're going to appreciate it. It's, in fact, for me, I appreciated it so much. Paris was like my home, right? I remember I took a trip to London, right, my native tongue, and I felt I was like homesick. I wanted to go back to Paris, and so it's like it's quite beautiful, really. Once you get through that initial fear and immerse yourself. So
I love all those answers. Thank you all. I hope that helps Nathalia a little bit. Okay, so we have a question from Kira. Kira, would you like me to ask it for you, or would you like to ask it?
I can ask it.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
It was just, how did you navigate taking classes and having an internship in a language that you weren't necessarily fluent in yet? Like what strategies did you use? Because like the material might be hard already, but you had to do it in a whole new language.
So I can start. For me, I approached it, we'll say, with the American card. I just had no shame going to my professors at the end of the lecture, the very first lecture of every class I took. And I said, "Hi, I'm American. I'm learning French. I might need your help." And this really opened lots of doors for me to be able to have maybe some extra explanations later on about the different material. And the same thing, I just kind of leaned into this like Americanness where we're very friendly people. And so I just leaned into it, and I would lean over in class and be like, "Oh, hey, I didn't really understand. Can you help?" And that's how I managed for this. It was really about who I was able to find that would help me through each one of the hurdles that I had to get through.
I recorded the lectures and then I would listen to them afterwards and kind of review it slower. But in terms of friendship, I would barter with the Germans and be like, "You teach me German, I teach you English." And it was great. It worked very well.
Thanks.
yeah, for me, well, with the lectures, it was a lot of physics, and fortunately, that's a bit of more universal. There is a bit of French, of course, when you're trying to explain everything, but like looking at the chalkboard, I felt like I was following a lot more. But so the lectures were a bit more manageable. Working in person, like the internship, right? I think the question was like, how do you speak with your colleagues in French? And I just think you're going to develop the same challenges that you would do in any other social setting, similar challenges, I should say. And so I guess my only advice would just be to make a list of like wherever you're at, I don't know, engineer, a chemist, biology, whatever your background is, there's going to be a list of vocabulary that's particular to that language that you're not going to use in your social life, but you will use in a professional setting. And so make it a goal to kind of understand, right, the lexicon of your technical background in that target language. That's going to make communication in that language much easier.
Yeah, one other final note, take notes in the language. Don't translate your notes to English. One, it takes forever, and two, you're not learning the vocab. So, and then you can look it up later if you have actually the words written down.
That's a good challenge. I like that. That's something that when I was when I lived in Japan, that was important for me too, was starting to think in the language instead of thinking in English and then trying to figure out how to say that. Because sometimes with another language, there's just not the same way to say it because there's cultural nuances that prevent you from saying it exactly how you would say it in American English, right? So those are all great points. Thank you. We're going to move on to a question from Kendall, and Kendall wants to ask it to you all.
Hello, hello. During your time abroad or right before your time abroad, is there anything that you did or wish you did outside of the required IGP program activities that helped you with your language, cultural, or educational understanding?
Kendall is a very good question. To me, I think just the only piece of feedback that I would provide, I had a difference. I don't know how different my style of learning it was from others, but my approach to learning a second language was almost strictly through immersion. I and by immersion, I just mean like a speech, like I just the very first thing that I did when I started learning French, even back in my high school days, was just I had all of these auditory lessons, and I from there on out, I just prioritized almost like learning, picking up a new language as if I were a child, right? It was only through NAU where I started formally taking classes and learning the grammar. But I think my affinity toward the adaptability and immersion really helped me out. It made me much more comfortable. So I guess that's just the answer that I'm providing here is just like what really helped me move in there. I was pretty comfortable when I moved and in France, like in navigating my way through France, even in the very beginning because of the uh, priority that I gave over uh, the listening and the oral comprehension and the speech side of the language. So I just maybe thought I'd communicate that to the rest of you. Everyone has a different approach of learning, by the way. It doesn't have to be like.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I'm struggling to find an answer because I don't know if it would have helped, I think is my biggest hesitation. So Argentina was a really hard place, especially as a Black woman going to. And I had people tell me this, and I had done my research beforehand, and I knew that. And then I got there, and it still was very difficult to adjust to that. So, and I had even been there before. I had traveled before, and I had seen there and experienced it, but it's different when you live there. So I think the advice I would give outside is make sure you do your research on your country and on the location that you're going to, outside of language, like historical events, political events, understanding the broader environment that you're diving into and not just the language. Language is important, but and.
I wish I would have participated in like the outside activities like Stomptish night at Marco's Pizza and like went to all of those activities and really got to practice language outside of class. I really did not take advantage of any of that, and I mean I struggled when I got to Germany. But yeah, definitely research where you're going, and when you're there, try to travel as much as possible to the smaller little towns and get to know like that culture because it's different than the bigger cities. And I mean you'll really understand where like the country if you get to visit those places.
Nice, thank you. Oh, I just love listening to all your advice.
One
Did you
more,
have something, Ricardo? Okay.
one more thing. NAU has a lot of internationals, right? I don't know if they still do, but they did when I was there.
They do. We
And
still
of
have them.
course, yeah. And so when I went to France, I had like a mini community that was like waiting for me there because I had befriended them while at NAU. I had this, well, I was so, I loved languages. And so a lot of these events where internationals tended to be, I found myself there too. Um, and so I had a lot of, well, yeah, I had a fair number of French friends. Um, and that really helped me. So if wherever you're going, if you can kind of replicate that, especially if you're like a first or second year or like a freshman or sophomore now, I would highly recommend you, I don't know, go to some events, make some effort to make some international friends.
That's great advice. And we do have a lot of events to connect you all with international students, and we try to promote those usually on our IGP Canvas page, sometimes on our LinkedIn, on our Instagram, especially our Instagram. I think we share a lot of things going on around campus, and certainly there's occasionally events that we coordinate to connect you with students from our partner universities as well. So just keep your eyes out for those, and you can always ask us if you want to be connected as well. We're happy to work on connecting you, since, you know, IGP, we work in the Center for International Education. So we're connected to both the inbound students, so the international students coming here, and outbound like yourselves who are going abroad. Oh, and Mira put a nice, great thing about the International Friends Club in our chat. And we also have this program called iFriends that potentially is going to happen again next year. So keep your eyes peeled. I think that's a really good piece that you added, Ricardo. Thank you. And onto Anastasia's as well. We have the GEL Center for like practicing languages as well. So do take advantage of those things if you haven't already. Okay, so I think we have a couple of questions, but I think I only really have time for maybe one more. I see a couple that are directed directly to Amanda, but for those, I think we'll have you connect with Amanda directly. I'll have them all put their information into the chat here. And then for those who are going to end up watching this on Zoom, we'll put their contact information on the Canvas page. So the last one I think we have time for that hasn't really been touched on too much yet is it's from an anonymous person. Did you relate to your culture abroad more than the US culture? And how did you overcome culture shock and reverse culture shock? And I think this is a really good one. And I know some of you sort of touched on it already, but please, if you're willing.
So again, I'm cheating. I think it's obvious the answer is yes. The French culture really jived with me. And that's something that I wasn't expecting, to be entirely honest. That said, even if French culture is something that is really like, it just fits for me, it just makes me feel like I came to some place that was meant for me. I still had culture shock. How do you deal with it? The first thing is to know that it's going to happen. And so when you start to have the signs, because it starts like you have the high of like you're happy to be here, but then you kind of go to the down. When you know that this is going to happen, kind of put in self-care techniques to be able to keep things that you did when you were at home in the US that you can do in the new country. So for me, it's something completely silly. It was painting my nails every Sunday night. When I started to feel myself go down, I went to Sephora, which of course is in France because it's French. And I bought nail polish and I started doing my nails every Sunday. So you just have to find your little routines that can help you have the continuity of what you like. And it's the same for reverse culture shock, because then maybe you have the tradition of buying your baguette every week. So then you find the place you can buy the baguette when you get back to the US.
We do have a place here in Flagstaff that sells very good baguettes. So if any of you want to know, let me know. Anyone else want to take a stab at that question?
Yeah, I would say cultural shock is an amazing opportunity to get contrast. And by that I mean, so what's an American culture? How do you tell if you're always around Americans all your life? And someone asks, what's it like to be American? It's actually kind of difficult to answer if that's all you know. Being in France, suddenly everything begins to look different. That's what I mean by cultural contrast, right? And this is kind of similar to cultural shock. So you really start to see all of these differences only when it's like having a gray picture next to a grayer picture, right? Like it's hard to tell how gray something is, but when you put them together, it's like you can tell them apart. That's kind of the idea with cultures. And so what I really learned being there is I start to really appreciate a lot of the qualities of the American culture and a lot of the qualities of the French culture simultaneously. So as I was learning to immerse myself in the French culture at the time, coming back into the States, I kind of learned. I had a completely different perspective of what it means to, be an American and be in this American culture, and I learned to appreciate them both equally, right? Before I didn't appreciate that whatsoever. I just didn't really think much about what it meant to be an American versus be French. But like once I had the experience that I had, I got to really grow my appreciation for both of them. So it's just that rich experience, yeah, that brought me a lot of breadth to my worldview.
All right. Thank you so much, panelists. We're at noon, so I don't want to keep you longer than our time. But Janelle had one final question that I think we can answer by if you're willing to share your contact information. She asked, how do we build our professional network? And I think a great way that some of you have already said is connecting with our IGP alumni. Obviously, students, you can see that our alumni have a lot of great wealth of knowledge to share and are super awesome and have a lot of different experiences. So if you all are willing to share in the chat, yes, please. Also, we have our LinkedIn group. Mira added that. If our students haven't or our alumni haven't joined that group, we would love to have you all there so we can all be connected there as well. But if you're all willing to share your email address in the chat, and I will also or your LinkedIn, that would be great. And I just want to say a really big thank you to you all for coming and talking to all our students, and also to our students who will listen to this afterward on the Zoom recording. Is there anything, final thing you'd like to share? All right. Well, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Great to see you. We really appreciate you. We thank you so much. This has been amazing for us. Thank you.
Yes. We're so
really proud of you.
It. I know, it's amazing to hear from you all.
Way to go. You're doing so great. It's such a pleasure. This has been really uplifting. Thank you.
It really has been. Thank you so much, all of you. We from the bottom of our hearts, we really appreciate it. And I hope all the students here learned a little something new and were inspired to, take action on something after this panel. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your evening or day. And we'll be in touch in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.